Is Sonic waiting for me? Or is this just a bug? It's a bug. Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Argonaut, and in this video, we're going to be continuing our Sonic Marathon by taking a look back at Sonic Adventure, Sonic's first 3D game. That was made by Sonic Team, including its development history, story, and gameplay, as well as my thoughts on it. But before all that, if you like this video and want to see more like it, then feel free to click that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. And now with that shameless promotion out of the way, on with the video! Back in the late 90s, things weren't looking so great for Sega. With the failure of the Sega CD, the 32X, and the Sega Saturn, Sega was in dire need of a win. Sonic, their mascot who had helped push so many Genesis consoles for them, hadn't even had a real game since Sonic and Knuckles, and that came out way back in 1994, meaning he had basically missed the Sega Saturn completely. Although the Sega Technical Institute did try making a 3D Sonic game for it called Sonic Extreme, it had ended up getting cancelled due to multiple reasons. Internal turmoil, important devs coming down with bad illnesses, things not running the way they should, and as for Sonic Team, they were busy developing a game called Night into Dreams at that time, which I'm kind of thinking about taking a look at for this channel, but I'm not going to dive too far into it because that could basically be its own video, and we're here to talk about a different topic today. Sega needed to turn things around, and so they cast a dream with their following console. This new console would feature cutting-edge graphics, enough to beat the likes of Sony's PlayStation and Nintendo's N64, and it'd also be the first console to have out-of-the-box online capabilities, all to restore people's faith in the brand and turn things around. And of course, front and center, there had to be Sonic. Sonic Adventure's development began in April of 1997, and was actually originally intended to be for the Sega Saturn itself, but the team realized quickly that with the Saturn's capabilities, it wouldn't be able to handle it, and once they were informed about the upcoming Dreamcast by Sega's then-president, Hayao Nakayama, they shifted focus to developing Adventure for that instead. Fun fact here, the Sonic team actually flew around to different jungles and temples so they could have a good image in mind when creating the stages for the game. A notable one that they went to was the Tikal Ruin in Guatemala, and after about 10 months in development and over 100 devs working on the game at some point, Sonic Adventure was released on 9/9/99 as a launch title for the Dreamcast. And now, with that, let's move on to my first experience with Sonic Adventure. When Sonic Adventure released, I was 7 at the time, and I had just gotten a PlayStation the Christmas prior, so there was no way my parents were going to buy me another console so soon, not even as a Christmas gift. But I did have a cousin that was roughly the same age as me, and he actually got a Dreamcast along with Sonic Adventure. Whenever I was at his house, he would let me play for a little bit, but overall, he was really stingy with letting me play his Dreamcast for long, so all I'd get to do is fight Chaos at the beginning of the game, which is like the first 5 minutes, before he'd take the controller back and swap games to something else. But man, that first taste stuck with me, and I really wanted a Dreamcast just so I could play Sonic Adventure myself. Even more so a few years later when Sonic Adventure 2 came out, and it kept showing that old commercial with the 2 hedgehogs and the safety glass, and I came super close to getting one. But unfortunately, I started seeing ads for something else, and chose to bide my time until the PS2 came out instead. And so, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 evaded my grasp yet again. It wouldn't be until 11 years later, after Sonic Adventure's initial release, that I would finally get my hands on it when it was released for the PlayStation 3 back in September of 2010. At the time, I remember really loving this game, even more so than Sonic Adventure 2. Although, to be fair, it's not like I played Adventure 2 for that long though. I kept putting it down at some point during some of the early Tails missions. But I loved Adventure 1 so much, I even collected all the emblems in the game, including all the ones for the Chow Garden, and I earned all the PS3 trophies for it, and admittedly, I don't even like the Chow Garden. But now that it's been over 15 years since I've last played Sonic Adventure, will it still hold up and be as good as I remember? With that being said, let's move on to talking about the story of the game. Given the new hardware in the Dreamcast, Sega wanted to craft a bigger story than those of the past. So they basically told one story from 6 different perspectives. Fun fact here, since this was the first real Sonic game to include extensive voice acting, they used it to unify some of the characters' names. For example, at the time in Japan, they knew the villain as Dr. Eggman, while in America, we knew him as Dr. Robotnik, which I still think is a cooler name. And I didn't know this until recently, but in America, we referred to the character Tails as Tails, but in Japan, they referred to him as Miles. But for the story of the game, Dr. Eggman learns about an ancient creature called Chaos, which is sealed inside the Master Emerald, and so he frees the creature by shattering the Master Emerald, which sends Angel Island plummeting. Again. And sets off to collect the 7 Chaos Emeralds so he can power up Chaos and use its power to destroy a city called Station Square, specifically for some reason, so he could build Robotnik Land. Sonic, upon fighting Chaos in his default state, learns about Eggman's plans and sets out with Tails to collect the Chaos Emeralds before him. And, now with that, let's move on to the gameplay of the game. For this playthrough of Sonic Adventure, I'm once again using the version that was released for the PS3, which is just a port of the GameCube version, and the first thing to notice is that the game had no way to change the aspect ratio, so I was stuck playing the entire thing like this the whole time. But you kinda get used to it after about 15 minutes, and since Sonic Adventure was going to be Sonic's first real 3D outing, Sonic Team felt his old design was a bit outdated, and opted to change all the character designs to look edgier and more mature. But since there are 6 different characters, they were each given their own unique playstyles and stories. So, here we go. Like I said earlier, for Sonic, his story is all about getting the Chaos Emeralds and stopping Eggman. For his gameplay, it's all about getting to the end of the stage. And Sonic Team needed to come up with a new way for him to attack targets, since, in a 3D setting, it proved difficult to just run up and jump on enemies. And so, they created the homing attack, so he can automatically lock in on enemies. And they also gave him a startlingly good spin dash, which lets him take off at high speeds. This is before he could boost like how he can nowadays, but I think this was also a really good early version of it. And if you're able to find the upgrades from him, you'll unlock the light speed dash, which, after a hell of a long charge up, lets you collect all the rings that are lined up in front of you, even taking you through the air. By the end of Sonic's story, he ends up defeating Eggman after a final confrontation, and foils his plans. Now, personally, I really liked Sonic's gameplay. It's more or less what you've come to expect of his gameplay nowadays, but without the boost. And with that, let's now move on to talking about Tails. For Tails, similar to Sonic, his story is all about collecting all the Chaos Emeralds and stopping Eggman. Only for Tails, the objective isn't just about getting to the end of the stage. Oh no. You typically also have to race Sonic to the end as well, which wasn't that hard. Half the times you kind of forget Sonic is there, and there was one stage for me where Sonic's AI bugged out completely and just stayed in one spot through basically the whole thing. Not to mention that Tails is completely game-breaking. He can only fly for about 3 seconds, which has to be one of his shortest flight times ever, but most of the levels were designed with Sonic in mind, so when you put Tails in, you can pretty much just hop off of any cliff and go almost wherever you want. At the end of Tails' story, he gets separated from Sonic and has to stop Eggman from detonating a missile he launched at Station Square, which, by the way, probably should have been Eggman's plan A over, let's use this ancient creature and all 7 Chaos Emeralds to destroy the city. But anyways, after beating Eggman on his own, Tails gains a bit more confident in himself and becomes more independent from Sonic. And now, moving on, let's go to talking about Knuckles. Like I said for the story earlier, Eggman shattered the Master Emerald, so of course that means Knuckles is involved. For his gameplay, it's all about using your treasure radar to collect the Master Emerald shards. You're able to freely traverse across the levels until you find the 3 hidden shards, and depending on the RNG, this could take a couple of seconds or a couple of minutes. And unlike in Sonic Adventure 2, his radar actually works for multiple shards at any time. I don't know why they took that away from Sonic Adventure 2, but along with that, Knuckles can also glide and climb up walls, and I gotta say, his glide feels really good in this game. Nowadays, whenever I think of his glide, I think of how bad it was in Sonic Frontiers. Unless they patched it. I haven't played Frontiers since the last update first came out. But in this game, it's fast and responsive. At the end of Knuckles' story, he ends up defeating Chaos and putting the Master Emerald back together. Now, before I move on, there's something I gotta say here. If you don't know, Knuckles is the last Echidna, and his whole job is to guard the Master Emerald on Angel Island. Now, throughout this whole game, at some point or another, the characters will end up seeing visions of the past of another Echidna named Tikal, and her people and their interactions with Chaos. Throughout the first couple of stories, I was thinking, I can't wait to see how Knuckles will react upon seeing more of his people, since, he's the last one, and he doesn't even know why he's guarding the Master Emerald to begin with. But when you finally get around to seeing him witness the visions, he basically reacts just like everybody else, not even questioning why his own people are here. I was kind of hoping for more from that, but gameplay-wise, I really enjoyed Knuckles stages in this game. The levels were big, but not overwhelmingly so, and again, his radar worked for any Emerald Shard at any given time. But with that, let's move on to the next character. Up next, we have Amy, who's actually playable in a Sonic game for the first time. Not counting old racing games or fighting games, but for Amy's story, she encounters a bird that escaped from Eggman and needs to help the bird run away from a robot that's pursuing it, since it has a Chaos Emerald in its necklace. For some reason. For the objective of Amy's stages, you have to reach the end of the level while being pursued by Eggman's robot. Now, I get that they were intending for a high-tension sort of thing here, but, you can just bonk it with your hammer if it ever gets too close, and it gets stunned. Although there is a limit to just how many times you can do it, chances are you're probably not going to hit that limit. But for Amy's story, at one point she does get captured by the robot and taken aboard Eggman's ship, where he takes the Chaos Emerald out of the necklace. Now, after escaping Eggman's ship with some help from Gamma, she decides to help the bird find its parents. While in the process of doing so, she ends up confronting and defeating the robot that's been chasing them all game, and ends up reuniting the bird with its family. Now, for Amy's gameplay, it basically felt like a shorter version of Sonic's levels. I kinda wish they made it a bit more ominous or had a more tense track playing during the sections when the robot was chasing you. Kinda like in Parasite Eve, when you have to run away from the ultimate being at the end. But anyway, let's move on to the next playstyle. Next up, we have Big the Cat, whose game we have E102 Gamma, who's a part of Eggman's newest line of machines. Now, his story isn't supposed to play a big role, but I actually found it to be a really interesting perspective. Just seeing things from the viewpoint of one of Eggman's robots, and seeing just how badly he treats them, or just how easily he'll dispose of them within hours after their creation. But anyway, for Gamma's story, he starts off working for Eggman, but then after seeing how badly the rest of the E-Series, or rather, his brothers, get treated, and after getting a speech from Amy, because as we've seen in Sonic Adventure 2 with Shadow, a few words from her will simply have you just questioning your beliefs, Gamma decides to switch his goals to rescuing the E-Series robots, which is a really fancy way of just saying destroying them to free the little creatures inside, which kind of makes me question, do Eggman's robots have free will, or do they take on the personality of the creatures inside of them and remember what they are? Because, from Gamma's point of view, shouldn't he want to get his brothers and help Sonic or go live in peace or something with them? Instead, he jumps to, I'm gonna destroy them and free what's inside. But anyway, after freeing all of his brothers, Gamma ends up getting heavily damaged while defeating an upgraded version of his brother E101 Beta, and they end up mutually destroying each other. And now, remember that bird that was with Amy? As it turns out, inside both Beta and Gamma were the bird's parents. And, for Gamma's gameplay, he has a run-and-shoot style, where you can lock on to enemies and blast away, Although for Gamma, he has a countdown timer constantly going down, so you always need to finish a level within a certain time. But for every enemy that you kill, it adds to the timer. Which, by the way, I find it hilarious that although you're an Eggman robot, Eggman's other robots seem to be standing in your way as you go through levels. Admittedly, at first, I thought I'd be annoyed playing Gamma's levels, since they're similar to Tails from Sonic Adventure 2, but I found myself actually really enjoying it as I went along. Also, what's really weird is that he's able to see Tikal's visions, despite being a robot. But now to move on to the next and last gameplay style. Yes, for the last character of the game, we have Big. For Big's story, it's about him chasing after his frog friend named Froggy, who starts acting weird after he eats a part of Chaos, and also ends up eating a Chaos Emerald. For Big's gameplay, it's all about fishing. Yes, that's right, Big's gameplay is all about fishing. Although I know a lot of people hated Big's story back in the day, it's honestly not that bad once you get the hang of it. You can honestly finish his whole story in about 20 minutes once you know what you're doing. The hardest part for me was I couldn't seem to cast where Froggy was for the first level, since what I saw above the water seemed to be different than what was under the water. But for the end of Big's story, he ends up having to rescue Froggy, who somehow ends up getting trapped inside Chaos, and then they basically just kinda steal Tails' plane and go home, leaving Sonic to deal with the rest. Which, I mean, not like Big could really help anyway. But for Big, I found him to be so out of place in this whole story. If anything, I'm really grateful that Sonic Team at least made his campaign short. When I researched why Big was even put into the game to begin with, it seems like it was done because the devs wanted to give players a slower-paced experience after all the rest of the faster-paced stuff the game had to offer. Now that we're done looking at the characters and their playstyles, we can move on to talking more about the actual game itself, like the hub world. Sonic Adventure is the first Sonic game to feature a hub world that you can explore and find power-ups in. Power-ups are basically items that give you new moves or enhance your current ones. They're not really worth talking about, but it is notable to say that Amy gets an especially useless one, where you can spin in place, and I mean like literally you cannot move while doing it, and then when the move is finished, she's dizzy after. I mean, what? But moving on. Hub worlds were added in to make the game more immersive. When I was a kid, I thought the hub world was huge and could never really tell where I was going, but playing it now, the whole hub world is like 3 different areas that aren't even that big. You basically memorize where everything is after like 30 minutes of playing. Usually I don't like hub worlds in my Sonic games, but this one wasn't as bad as I remembered it being. And now for the bosses of the game. Within each character's story, they typically end up facing at least one boss, and almost everybody fights some form of chaos, even Big. But the bosses here aren't really anything to write home about. The most notable one for me was the fight against Chaos when playing as Tails, but that was more because I was missing Sonic's homing attack more than anything. And along with the boss fights, you'll occasionally have rival fights, where you end up having to face another character, but I mean, those are just like...
Oh no! Oh no! Give it your... Oh no!
And they're pretty much all like that, so there's not much to say there. Moving on, Sonic Adventure doesn't have any special stages like prior games to get Chaos Emeralds. You are, however, able to unlock the Supersonic story once you play through all the other stories. From what I remember of Sonic Heroes special stages, I'm kinda glad they went this route. They did, however, put something else into the game for replayability, but we'll get to that a little bit later. For the Supersonic story of the game, Chaos betrays Eggman and goes around and collects all the 7 Chaos Emeralds, and uses their negative energy to turn into his perfect Chaos form, and begins to attack Station Square, just like Eggman wanted. But anyway, we learned about Chaos's backstory and how Knuckles' ancestors basically tried to use the Chaos Emeralds for their own purposes, and ended up hurting some Chow in the process, which royally pissed off Chaos. So he went into his perfect form and mostly just absolutely freaking obliterated them. Until Tikal, the chief's daughter, sealed herself and Chaos into the Master Emerald. And fast forward to now, Although Chaos used the negative energy of the emeralds to achieve his perfect form, Sonic is able to use the positive energy of the emeralds to go supersonic. The gameplay for this is pretty much, you have to build up speed and ram into Chaos about 6 times before your rings run out. If you get hit and you lose your momentum, and if you don't have enough momentum by the time you reach Chaos, your attack won't do any damage, and then you'll have to start all over again to hit him. Now, unlike other supersonic stages, Sonic isn't really flying so much as gliding across the water, and you can't control him on a vertical axis. Truthfully, it might as well be the same as using regular Sonic on a regular stage, but hey, it's still fun to do it. All the while, Open Your Heart is just blasting in the background. For the ending of the game, after beating Chaos, Tikal shows him that all the Chao he was protecting from years ago were still around and living in harmony with people, and that basically calms him down. And then him and Tikal go off to live in peace. Meanwhile, with the city basically flooded and destroyed, Sonic runs off into the sunset with a job well done. Now that covers most of the main game, but the devs actually did put something in the game to increase its replayability, and that would be the emblems. Whenever you complete a level or beat a character's story, you earn an emblem. But you can also replay the levels with a different objective, like finishing within a certain time limit, or finishing with a certain amount of rings, or you can explore the hub world or get certain scores on the minigames to get other emblems. And there are a total of 130 emblems, which I did manage to earn back in 2010, which apparently took me about 50 hours according to this. And now, funny story here before I move on. Apparently, I never bothered to buy the Sonic Adventure DX DLC back in the day, and knowing me, I probably chose to do everything in the main game before getting it, and once I did, I probably saw that it would add even more missions and emblems to collect, and most likely said, hell no, to that. Looking at it now, part of me thinks that maybe they should have forced the player to earn a certain amount before being able to move on, totaling to maybe 50 out of the 130 by the end of the game, which I think is fair. That way you're not forced into doing everything, leaving you plenty of missions to attempt to get emblems, but I digress. The last thing I want to talk about that was in the game is the Chao Garden. The game gives you the ability to raise and train Chao, and throughout the game, you're able to collect animals whenever you destroy an enemy. You can actually let your Chao fuse with the little animals you collect and take on some of their attributes and stats. And you can also have your Chao compete in minigames. But even more impressively, the Dreamcast had the VMU to it, which was basically a memory card for the console, but more importantly, you're able to transfer your Chao over to it and remove them from the Dreamcast and actually play minigames with your Chao on it. Now, seeing that Sonic Adventure came out in 1999, and remembering Tamagotchi was huge back then, I never realized just how much of a good idea this was. Unfortunately though, since I played the game on my PS3, this feature would forever be lost to me. But as for the Chao Garden as it is, the first time after forcing myself to play it, I had a little bit of fun towards the end while focusing on it, but at the end of the day, I generally don't really like the Chao Garden. It's cool that it's there, and if other people like it, that's also cool, but it's just not for me. If I played it back in the 90s on the Dreamcast VMU, then maybe it'd be a different story, because remember, back then, we didn't have phones or anything like that for portable gaming. It was basically a Game Boy or your parents' Nokia to play Snake. But with that, I believe I've covered everything I want to talk about with the gameplay, so let's move on to how Sonic Adventure did after it came out. After Sonic Adventure released, it sold really well, selling 2.5 million copies as of 2006, making it the #1 Dreamcast game, selling even more than its sequel, Sonic Adventure 2. And now, I never knew this before, but do you remember that old cartoon, Sonic Underground? That show where their mother was never found? Apparently, Sega had actually commissioned it to help promote the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure. And unfortunately, despite all this and how well Sonic Adventure did, it wasn't enough to save the Dreamcast from failing. It could be its own video as to why that happened, so I'm not going to dive too far into it, but remember the bar for the Dreamcast was set pretty high, since it needed to basically recoup the losses from all the failed consoles before it. And the PS2 coming out didn't really help make things any better. It was to the point that by the time Sonic Adventure 2 came out, Sega had already made an announcement saying that the Dreamcast was going to stop production. But Adventure did live on past its debut console. It ended up getting ported to the Nintendo GameCube with Sonic Adventure DX, which seems normal now, but was absolutely unheard of back then. I mean, that'd be like Mario Galaxy being on a PlayStation console. And, obviously, it'd later on get a port to PS3 and Xbox around 2010, where they basically gave you Sonic Adventure DX, but yet stripped away the actual DX content to sell back to you as DLC. It may be over 25 years old, but you can still see things that Sonic Adventure did in modern Sonic games today. But now, with that, let's move on to my thoughts on it. Sonic Adventure was Sonic's first real venture into 3D, and again, this game is over 25 years old, so it should be given its grace. But man, this game was janky. The worst part for me was I found myself having to fight the camera every 2 seconds. And what's weird is you do have free camera control in this game, but only when you're standing still, and it shifts right back when you start moving again. The facial animations, especially Sonic's, are just hilarious, and the voice acting isn't exactly the best.
You couldn't get in freeze! Let's go!
Amy! Wait! Oh, man! That girl is such a pain.
But again, this was their first time trying that type of stuff. I did enjoy Sonic's gameplay, especially Speed Highway, that iconic scene with Sonic running down the side of the building, and it felt nice that he didn't have a boost but instead the spin dash. Tails levels were meh. I didn't like them, but I didn't hate them. And besides the camera, I think Knuckles' gameplay was perfect in this game. I really enjoyed Omega's story. He somehow had the deepest one out of all of them. It felt so existential. How he's questioning his existence and what he's doing by blindly following Eggman's orders. Big was kinda just there. I mean, I don't hate him, but I feel like the game could have worked better without him as a playable character. Maybe if he was another side thing along with the Chow Garden, like what they did with him in Sonic Frontiers, it'd be better, but thank God they made his story so short. And for Amy, I wasn't the biggest fan of her gameplay, but I like that in her story, she was also trying to be more independent from Sonic. I thought that all the games in this time period had her basically stalking the guy, but in this one, she just happens to run into him, and basically rescues herself after getting captured, and decides to solve the rest of her problems on her own without relying on him. And okay, I gotta say, I always find the ending to Adventure funny, because, like, Station Square essentially gets destroyed more or less, just like how Eggman wanted. And in the final moments, while the camera shows how destroyed it was, Sonic just kinda runs off into the sunset, heading off to his next adventure. Honestly, I'd probably go back to Sonic Adventure sooner than I would Sonic Adventure 2. While I do enjoy Sonic Adventure 2's story more, Sega knew who you were here for in this game, because Sonic's story is about 5 hours long, and for everyone else, you can probably beat their stories in roughly an hour. Compare that to 2, where they tried balancing everybody's playtime. I mean, Shadow only has 4 levels in that game. The one thing that everybody buying this game has in common is that we're here for Sonic, and the other gameplay styles are just a bonus. And if there's one that you don't like, at least in Sonic Adventure 1, you won't be stuck playing it for too long. Like, again, that was my problem with Sonic Adventure 2. It was typically the Tails levels that made me put it down. But now, at the beginning of the video, my question was, does this game hold up? Well, if you have a bit of an open mind and don't mind putting up with some jankiness, then I think Sonic Adventure is a great and ambitious first attempt at bringing the blue blur into 3D, along with being a super important game for him that helped shape the franchise into what we know it as today. And those are my thoughts on Sonic Adventure. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? What are your favorite memories with it? Or what were some janky moments for you? Let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to hear from you. And now, moving on with our Sonic Marathon, Seeing as I already made a video about Sonic Adventure 2, I wanted to move on to Sonic Heroes and then Shadow the Hedgehog, but unfortunately, my PlayStation 2 isn't really working. And when I tried borrowing another one from someone, it basically crapped itself when I tried playing Beautiful Joe. And I can't exactly emulate anything because my computer has all the power of a Russian potato clock from the 1950s, so I'm unfortunately gonna have to skip those games for now.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Hey! Before we go on saying things like that, check out what's coming up next.